What's up guys, it's Ash here and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, we've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the best formation in FIFA 23, this being the 4-3-2-1. But as always guys, just before we get started, please be sure to drop this a like as it does really help me out. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics, for the defensive style I like to have this on balanced. This is because it gives me the greatest control over the defense, where when I want to press I'm able to press, and then when I want to drop off, be a little bit more passive, I'm also able to do that. You're not able to do that with the other settings because they're very one-dimensional, which is why I do suggest balanced, as you have the greatest control. Moving on to the defensive width guys, I like to have this on 35. The reason for this is so we can primarily defend in a nice, narrow and compact shape. We don't want to go too far though and have the width like super low, because we're not going to be able to cover the wide areas in case an opponent tries an attack down the wing. So it's important to maintain at least some width so we can still cover the wide areas. The reason we want to block off the narrow areas primarily though is because that's where all the danger is at. We don't want our opponents just running right through the middle of us. Moving on to the depth guys, I like to have this on 60. This is because it's a nice balanced defensive line. Basically our defensive line isn't going to be too low to the point where we're always getting pinned back and we have loads of pressure on us, and on the flip side we're not going to have the depth too high to the point where our defensive line is crazy high up and one through ball will undo us. So I like to go for a nice balanced defensive line where sometimes we can sit off a little bit and then other times we can press up higher. Moving on to build up play guys, I like to have this on balance. This is because I believe it is the most consistent in the game. With balance you can play slowly, you can play quickly, you can kind of do whatever you want when you want. If you use something like slow build up or fast build up, it's very restricted, because for example if you're using fast build up and then you try and play a little bit slower, it's not going to work too well. The same way as if you use slow build up and then try and play a bit faster, it's not really going to work too well either. So with balance you can kind of just pick and choose when you want to play quicker or slower. Moving on to chance creation guys, as always I suggest direct passing. This is because it's the most meta option in the game. Basically your attacking players will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do these really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. This really does help you create those chances, and players also make extra movements in the box so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee the goals. This is why I say direct passing is super important. Moving on to the attacking width guys, I like to have this on 45. It's not really anything specific to use, but the reason I have this on 45 is because I don't want the width to be like too low to the point where it feels like my players are sat on top of each other and there's absolutely no width between my players. And on the flip side, I don't want it to feel super wide like a 4-3-3, because if I wanted to use a 4-3-3, I would use a 4-3-3. So I kind of just like to go for something in between where it's neither too narrow or too wide. Moving on to players in box guys, I just have this bang in the middle on 5. This is so we get some players into the box to create those chances, but at the same time we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we're always getting counter-attacked. As for corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1, as there is a set piece routine that I use that requires these to be on 1. There is a link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen if you are interested. Okay guys, so moving on, I'm just going to give you guys the types of players that you could be using in each position, as a lot of people get confused about how they should set up their team in a certain formation, what type of players are the best for a formation. So I just thought I'd clear this up to help you guys out if you are struggling. So starting off with the striker guys, I suggest going for a nice well-rounded player. This is because this is a one striker formation, so where you could get the balance between two strikers in a two striker formation, you have to get that balance all in one player in a one striker formation. So I suggest going for a player that can do a bit of everything, somebody that can shoot on either foot with maybe like a 5-star weak foot, somebody with decent dribbling ability and obviously the pace, but yeah, I just like to go for somebody that is able to do a bit of everything, as I feel like I get the most out of the team in this formation that way, and it really does restrict your play a lot less. Moving on to the right forward and the left forward, I suggest using like really good wingers. This is because these players are like the main outlets in the team, if you can say that, even though it's a narrow formation, but these are the players that are going to be doing like most of the running in your attack and that kind of thing. So it is important that you use players that are competent enough. You want to use players that are fast, players that have really good dribbling, maybe like the 5-star skill moves if you can get it. And it's also important that they can finish off those chances because they are in those forward positions. But yeah, just use anyone you're comfortable with there. Moving on to the left centre mid, I use an actual attacker here. This is because he's not actually going to have to play as a centre mid in game. This will make more sense when we're in the player instructions, but you can pretty much use whoever you want there. So you could use like an Mbappe, a Neymar, Alawara, and Jairzinho, pretty much anyone you want in this position here. Moving on to the middle centre mid, I go for a more defensive minded midfielder. This is somebody that's going to stay back, break up the play, and make us as defensively sound as possible. So I suggest somebody with a medium high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in defence and they're not too bothered about going forward. Moving on to the right centre mid, I suggest using a more box to box style player. This is somebody that's going to attack and defend and have a bit of a free roll. So if you can get it, a high work rate is super beneficial as you get the maximum contribution in both attack and defence, but just ensure that this player has a nice well-rounded card. Moving on to the fullbacks, guys, I like to go for a balance between my two fullbacks. So in the left back position, I have Roberto Carlos. This is somebody that's going to be like more attacking. He's going to be my more attacking fullback. This is somebody that's actually going to contribute on the attack for us when we're going forward. And then in the right back position, I've got Cafu, who's a little bit more defensively sound, maybe lacks that on the ball ability, but it's going to bring the balance to the defense. So one more attacking fullback, one more defensive fullback in my opinion. As for the centre backs, these just need to be the meta players. These are obviously players that are very fast, medium high work rate if you can get it, really good animation choices, good physicality. You know the types of defenders you want to be using in this game. As for the goalkeeper, it really doesn't matter, they're all trash. Moving on to the player instructions, guys, on the striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. The reason we have him on stay central is because since he's our striker, we don't want him drifting off super wide. We want him to be in the middle, we want him to be where the striker should be, so he is getting involved as much as possible. He's not really too much use for us out wide. We also have him on mixed attack, as I feel like you get a lot more out of the player this way. When you put them on getting behind, they always make the same one-dimensional runs and it restricts your play a lot of the time. When you put them on mixed attack, you get more dynamic movements, they get more involved in the build-up, and I think it is just 10 times easier to attack this way. Moving on to the left forward, we have him on stay central and getting behind. We have him on stay central so he doesn't drift out too wide because we still want him to attack those narrow pockets of space. If we have him like drifting out wide on the balanced width, it can feel a bit like a 4-3-3, which is not exactly what we want. So we want him to stay central, we want him to stay in the dangerous positions, and we actually do have this player on getting behind, so they're always making the darting runs, using their pace and causing a lot of trouble to the opponents. Moving on to the right forward, we have him on comeback on defense. This is so it'll make the team defend in a 4-4-2. Now, the reason we have it defend in a 4-4-2 is because the 4-4-2 is a much more superior defensive formation than the 4-3-2-1. So we're going to attack in a 4-3-2-1, but we're going to put this player on comeback on defense, so he will come back to defend as a right mid in the 4-4-2, if that makes sense. Super important you have him on comeback on defense for that reason. Moving on to the right center mid, with the box-to-box player, we have him on the default settings and cover center. Default settings because he has a bit of a free roll, don't really want to restrict him all that much. The only important thing is that we have him on cover center, so he does defend as one of the center mids in the 4-4-2 shape. Moving on to the middle center mid, the more defensive minded player, we have him on stay back while attacking, stay on the edge of the box cross and cover center. We have him on stay back while attacking because he's defensive, of course, we don't want him flying forward. We have him on stay on the edge of the box for cross because in case the AI does take him forward, he's not actually going to commit into the penalty area. And then we have him on cover center, so he does defend as one of the center mids in the 4-4-2 shape. Now moving on to the left center mid, where I said you can use an actual attacker, I'm hoping this is starting to make sense now. We have him on get forward because he is a more attacking minded player, so he can get forward, which is what we want. We have him on get into the box across, so he's not hesitant to get into the penalty area. And then we have him most importantly on cover wing. This is so he does defend as a left mid in the 4-4-2 shape. This is why I said it's not super important that they have really good defensive stats, because they don't actually have to defend as a centre mid, because it obviously defends in a 4-4-2 and this player will be the left mid. Moving moving on to the left back, my more attacking fullback, I have him on balanced attack and overlap. This is because the 4-3-2-1 is obviously a narrow formation, and sometimes it's useful to have a wider option when you're going forward. So by having them on balanced attack and overlap the left back, it's going to make it so we have a narrow attack and a wide attack at the same time. As for the right back, my more defensive fullback, I have him on stay back and overlap. This is so we always have at least 3 defenders back at a time, but if we do send him on a run forward, he'll make the overlapping runs to add extra width. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these are on the default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-3-2-1. If you have enjoyed or found it useful, please be sure to drop this a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you are new, and don't forget to turn on notifications. And with all that aside guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.